I'm Jessica Miller, 28 years old, and last month my family handed me an eviction notice as a birthday gift. The house I renovated, the home I thought was mine, suddenly wasn't. Their smug faces as they explained they needed it for my brother's wedding still burns in my memory. What they didn't know was that my grandmother left me more than just a house in her will. As they celebrated their perfect wedding, I prepared a gift they'd never forget. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button, because family betrayal cuts deepest. And this story might just help anyone who's been stabbed in the back by those who should love them most. Growing up in Meadowbrook, a picturesque town in upstate New York, I always felt like an outsider in my own family. My parents, Margaret and Richard Miller, were fixtures in the local community. Dad ran a moderately successful real estate company, and Mom headed the neighborhood association with an iron fist. They lived for appearances, for the nods of approval from other upper-middle-class families, and for maintaining the perfect family image at all costs. Then there was Adam, my younger brother by 3 years. From the moment he was born, it was clear who the favorite was. While I received practical gifts and lectures about responsibility, Adam got expensive toys and endless encouragement. When I brought home straight, as my achievements were expected. When Adam managed a B-, there was celebration and ice cream. This wasn't my imagination or typical sibling rivalry. The disparity was obvious even to family friends who would occasionally shoot me sympathetic glances during gatherings. My sanctuary during childhood was my grandmother Grace's home. A small lake house about 20 minutes from our family home, it became my refuge. Every weekend I could escape there. Grandma Grace saw me, really saw me. She celebrated my achievements, nurtured my interest in architecture and design, and most importantly, she listened. While my parents were busy crafting the perfect family narrative with Adam as the golden child, Grandma Grace was teaching me about resilience and self-worth. "Jessie," she would say, her hands weathered but gentle as they guided mine through a sketch, "you build your own foundations in this life. Make them strong enough to withstand any storm." I took her advice literally. I threw myself into academics, earning scholarships that allowed me to attend college without financial help from my parents. They seemed almost disappointed when I announced my full ride to Cornell's architecture program, as though my independence was an inconvenience to their narrative. During college, I worked part-time jobs, built connections, and graduated with honors. While Adam dropped out of 3 different programs, each time met with understanding and additional financial support from our parents. The contrast was stark but familiar. When Grandma Grace passed away during my final year of college, the loss was devastating. She was my anchor, my true family. At the reading of her will, I learned she had left me a sum of money specifically designated for building your foundation. My parents were visibly displeased, but there was nothing they could do. With my inheritance and savings from 3 years of working at an architecture firm, I purchased a modest craftsman-style home in our hometown at the age of 26. My parents seemed baffled by my decision to return to Meadowbrook, but I had my reasons. Part of me wanted to prove something, to show them I could succeed right under their noses without their help. The house needed work, but that was perfect for me. Every weekend for a year, I renovated one room after another. New hardwood floors laid by my own hands. Kitchen cabinets I designed myself. A reading nook in the bay window that reminded me of Grandma Grace's lake house. This place became more than a house. It was physical proof of my resilience, a manifestation of my grandmother's wisdom about building strong foundations. My career flourished too. I was promoted to junior partner at Hartman Architectural Design, managing projects for commercial clients across the state. My life was coming together beautifully, despite the continuing cold distance of my family. About 6 months before my fateful birthday, things began to shift. My parents started calling more frequently. At first, I was hopeful that they were finally recognizing my accomplishments, perhaps even proud of me. How naive I was. The calls always eventually circled to money. Dad's business was facing temporary challenges. They needed just a small loan to cover some expenses. Each time the amount increased. Each time I reluctantly helped, hoping it might bridge the emotional gap between us. Then came the announcement of Adam's engagement to Sophia Barrett, daughter of a prominent family who owned several car dealerships across 3 states. Suddenly, the pressure intensified. My parents needed to put their best foot forward for the Barrett family. The wedding would be extravagant, a statement event at the most exclusive vineyard in the region. "Family image is everything right now, Jessica," my mother said during one of her unexpected visits to my home. She glanced around with barely concealed criticism at my carefully restored house. "We need to present a united, successful front to the Barretts. They're used to a certain level of, well, you understand." I didn't understand, not really. But the frequency of their visits increased always, with thinly veiled requests for financial contributions to wedding expenses or not-so-subtle hints about how I could better present myself as part of the Miller family. Legacy. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The way my father would casually ask about my home equity. How my mother began suggesting I could always move into something more appropriate for a single woman after the wedding. How they both seemed to be measuring my house with their eyes during visits. But I was still that little girl desperate for her parents' approval, still hoping that maybe finally they would see my worth. That hope blinded me to what was coming, to the betrayal that would finally break whatever fragile ties still bound me to the people who should have loved me most. My 28th birthday fell on a Tuesday, a seemingly ordinary day that would end up changing everything. I had taken the day off work, planning a quiet celebration for myself, maybe a long bath delivery from my favorite Italian restaurant and a good book. After years of disappointing family birthdays, I had learned to treat myself rather than expect others to make the day special. That morning I woke to a text from my mother. "We have a special birthday surprise for you. We'll stop by around 4 p.m., be dressed appropriately." The message was so typically my mother that I almost laughed. Even a birthday visit came with dress code requirements. Still, I felt a flutter of hope. A surprise. From my family. Perhaps they had finally recognized my achievements, my independence. Maybe this was the turning point in our relationship I had longed for since childhood. I spent more time than usual getting ready, selecting a blue dress that complemented my eyes, applying light makeup, even putting out some cheese and crackers on my hand-restored vintage serving tray. The house was immaculate, showing off all my renovation work to its best advantage. At precisely 4:02 p.m., the doorbell rang. My parents stood on the porch, my father clutching a large box wrapped in silver paper with an elaborate blue bow. Adam stood slightly behind them, looking uncomfortable, and continuously checking his phone. "Happy birthday, Jessica," my mother said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she air-kissed near my cheek, careful not to smudge her perfect lipstick. "You're looking healthy," she added, her standard backhanded compliment, as she stepped into my home. "I see you've added some new pillows to the couch. Interesting choice of pattern." My father gave me a brief, awkward side hug, then immediately placed the large gift box on my coffee table. "Where should we sit, Jess? We have some exciting news along with your birthday surprise." Adam barely looked up from his phone, offering only a mumbled, "Happy birthday," before dropping onto my sofa without waiting for an invitation, his shoes resting dangerously close to my handcrafted throw pillows. "What's this about exciting news?" I asked, serving them sparkling water with lemon slices. No one touched the cheese plate. "Well," my mother began, exchanging a meaningful look with my father. "As you know, Adam and Sophia's wedding is going to be the event of the season. The Barretts have connections to nearly everyone who matters in the tri-state area." "That's great," I said, the familiar feeling of invisibility creeping in. Even on my birthday, the conversation immediately turned to Adam. "The thing is," my father interjected, his business voice taking over, "we've had some investment opportunities that didn't quite pan out as expected. Temporary setback, of course. But with the wedding expenses..." "What your father is trying to say," my mother cut in smoothly, "is that we've had to make some strategic financial decisions for the family." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I glanced at Adam, who was suddenly very interested in a loose thread on his designer shirt. "Open your gift, Jess," my father said, pushing the silver box toward me. "Then we can explain everything properly." With increasing unease, I untied the elaborate bow and carefully removed the silver wrapping paper. Inside was a plain white box. I lifted the lid and found myself staring at a stack of legal documents. Confusion turned to disbelief as I read the top page. It was an eviction notice requiring me to vacate my home within 30 days. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely a whisper as I flipped through the papers. This is my house. I bought it with my inheritance from Grandma Grace. My father cleared his throat. Well, technically that's not entirely accurate. If you look at the original paperwork, you'll see that the house was purchased through a family trust that I established. Yes, your inheritance money was used as the down payment, but the trust holds the actual ownership. We never intended to activate this clause, my mother added, her voice dripping with false sympathy. But with Adam's wedding and the impression we need to make on the Barretts, we simply need to liquidate this asset. The housing market is excellent right now, my father continued, as if he were discussing a random property rather than my home. We can sell this place for nearly double what was paid. That money will help finance the wedding and give Adam and Sophia a proper start. Family needs come first, Jessica. I'm sure you understand. I looked at Adam, hoping for some sign of discomfort, some recognition of the enormity of what they were doing. He briefly met my eyes, then shrugged. It's not personal, Jess. It's just, Sophia's parents are contributing so much, and our family needs to match that. You're always so independent anyway. You can find another place easily. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated that I couldn't even cry. I sat there, the papers heavy in my hands, as my family watched expectantly. You're evicting me from my own home. As a birthday gift, I finally managed. Don't be dramatic, my mother sighed. We're giving you plenty of notice. Most tenants only get 2 weeks, and we thought it would be better to tell you in person as a family. We've even found you some apartment options, my father added, pulling out another folder from his briefcase, much more suitable for a single professional woman. You should be thanking us, really. The audacity was breathtaking. They sat in my living room on furniture I had carefully selected and restored, telling me that they were taking it all away for Adam's benefit. Again, always for Adam. I think you should leave now, I said, quietly, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, despite the earthquake happening inside me. Now, Jessica, don't be difficult about this, my mother started, but my father placed a hand on her arm. Let's give her some time to process. The papers are all in order and the timeline is clear. We can discuss details later. He stood straightening his tie. Happy birthday, Jess. I hope you can see that this is really best for everyone in the long run. They filed out, Adam still glued to his phone. My mother pausing at the door to add, do let us know when you've found a new place. And remember, the Barrett family is very traditional. They'll expect all of us to play our proper roles at the wedding. I've taken the liberty of ordering your bridesmaid dress. Fitting is next Tuesday. The door closed behind them, and I sat alone in the sudden silence of the home that was no longer mine. After they left, I sat motionless for nearly an hour, the eviction papers scattered across my lap. The grandfather clock in the hallway, a piece I had restored from a salvage yard, ticked away the minutes as the reality of my situation slowly sank in. When the shock finally broke, I didn't cry as expected. Instead, a cold, clear anger washed over me. I gathered every document they had left, spread them across my dining table, and began reading every word, looking for anything that might help me fight this. Sleep was impossible that night. I paced through the rooms of my house, touching the walls. I had painted the trim I had sanded and stained the kitchen island I had installed with my own hands. This wasn't just a house. It was physical proof of my resilience, my independence, my value, and they were taking it away as casually as they had dismissed my achievements throughout my life. Morning came, and I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Then I made another call to Tara Livingston, a friend from college who had become a real estate attorney. Her voice was warm, concerned as I explained the situation. Can you come to my office today? Bring all the paperwork, every single page. 3 hours later, I sat in Tara's sleek downtown office, watching her face as she reviewed the documents. They were clever, she finally said, removing her reading glasses. The family trust structure is legitimate. There's a clause here that your father inserted, allowing the trustee, which is him to liquidate assets if deemed necessary for family financial stability. So they can just take my house, the one I paid for with my inheritance, the one I've put thousands of dollars and countless hours into renovating. My voice cracked, despite my efforts to remain composed. Tara reached across her desk to squeeze my hand. There might be a loophole regarding the inheritance designation, but fighting this would be an expensive legal battle with no guaranteed outcome. And the timeline. With the eviction notice already served. "What would you do?" I asked quietly. She sighed. "Honestly, as your friend, not your lawyer, I'd probably cut my losses, negotiate for a fair portion of the sale proceeds, and find a new place. Save your energy and money for rebuilding, not fighting a battle that could drain you financially and emotionally." I left Tara's office feeling defeated but also strangely determined. If I was going to lose my home, I wanted to understand exactly why, beyond the surface explanation of Adam's wedding. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I used the emergency key my mother had insisted I keep to enter my parents' house while they were at their weekly country club dinner. Their home office was immaculate, as always, files meticulously labeled and organized. It took me less than 30 minutes to find what I was looking for. My father's business wasn't just facing temporary challenges. Miller Real Estate was on the verge of bankruptcy. Multiple loans had been taken out against business assets. Credit card statements showed balances in the tens of thousands. And there, in a folder labeled Barrett Wedding, was a budget spreadsheet that made my blood run cold. The venue alone was costing $90,000. Flowers, $20,000. Designer attire for the entire family, another $30,000. The total at the bottom of the spreadsheet, $350,000 for a single day. Next to that folder was another labeled Miller Properties Assets. Inside was an appraisal for my house dated 2 months before my birthday. Estimated market value $420,000. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. They weren't just being cruel or playing favorites again. They were desperate. They were going to sell my house to pay for Adam's obscenely expensive wedding to maintain appearances with the Barrett family. I carefully replaced everything and left a new understanding hardening my resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about a family pattern that had gone on too long, a toxic dynamic that had shaped all our lives. The next day, I called in sick again and made an appointment with another attorney, Rebecca Winters, who specialized in trust law. She had a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless, particularly in cases involving family financial disputes. "So your grandmother left you an inheritance specifically designated for building your foundation, and your parents used that money as a down payment on a house that was placed in a family trust without your full understanding." Rebecca clarified, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Yes, and now they're evicting me to sell the house to pay for my brother's wedding," I added. Rebecca's mouth tightened. "Bring me your grandmother's will and any documents related to the inheritance distribution. There's something not quite right here." It took some digging, but I found a copy of Grandma Grace's will in my personal files. Rebecca spent hours reviewing it alongside the trust documents, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. "Jessica," she finally said, "your grandmother was smarter than your parents gave her credit for. There's a provision here regarding the lake house property. Did you know about this?" I shook my head. I knew she owned it, but I thought it was sold after she died. My parents said the proceeds were part of my inheritance. According to this, the lake house was never to be sold. It was placed in a separate trust with you as the beneficiary to take ownership upon either your 30th birthday or in the event of, and I quote, "any attempt to divert the primary inheritance from its intended purpose of establishing Jessica's independent home and security." For the first time since receiving the eviction notice, I felt a glimmer of hope. So what does that mean exactly? Rebecca's smile was sharp. "It means, my dear, that we have options. Your parents may have found a loophole regarding the house you're living in, but they've triggered the clause that gives you immediate right to the lake house property. And according to county records I just pulled up, that property has significantly appreciated in value over the years." As Rebecca outlined potential strategies, I began to see a path forward. Not just to survive this betrayal, but to finally break the cycle of manipulation and favoritism that had defined my family relationships. During this time, I wasn't completely alone. My coworkers noticed something was wrong despite my attempts to maintain a professional facade. Rachel, my closest friend at the firm, insisted on having dinner with me after I returned to work. "You're staying with me until this is sorted," she declared after I explained the situation. "My spare room is yours for as long as you need it." Another unexpected source of support came from my cousin Emily, my mother's niece, who had been essentially excommunicated from family gatherings years ago for reasons no one discussed. I reached out to her on a hunch. "They did something similar to me," she confirmed over coffee at a cafe far from any family haunts. "Uncle Richard convinced my dad to invest in one of his development projects. When it failed, they blamed my dad and cut ties rather than admit Uncle Richard's mistakes." Classic Miller family dynamics. Emily introduced me to others who had experienced my parents' manipulative behavior over the years: former business partners, distant relatives, even our old housekeeper who had been fired for disloyalty after 20 years of service. A pattern emerged from these conversations, a clear picture of how my parents operated. They used people until they were no longer useful, discarded them without remorse, and rewrote the narrative to maintain their spotless reputation. As painful as these revelations were, they strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully mine anymore, it was about justice, about breaking a toxic pattern that had hurt too many people. With each piece of information, each new ally, my plan began to take shape. In the first days after receiving the eviction notice, my thoughts of revenge were admittedly dark. I fantasized about exposing all my parents' secrets at the rehearsal dinner, about setting fire to the family photo albums, about salting the perfectly manicured lawn my mother prized above all else. But as the initial shock and rage subsided, I recognized these impulses for what they were: the wounded reactions of a hurt child. If I truly wanted to break free from the toxic family dynamic, I needed to be strategic, not destructive. "Revenge is a dish best served legal," Rebecca quipped during one of our strategy sessions, "and preferably with documentation in triplicate." With Rebecca's guidance, I began developing a plan that would both protect me and deliver a form of justice that couldn't be dismissed or manipulated away. The key lay in my grandmother's will and the separate trust she had established for the lake house property. "Your grandmother clearly anticipated something like this might happen," Rebecca explained as we pored over the documents. "The language here is specific and intentional. She wanted to ensure you had security regardless of your parents' actions." The lake house, which I had believed sold years ago, was actually still owned by the trust. My parents had been collecting rental income from it for years, income that legally should have been held in the trust for my benefit. "That's misappropriation of trust assets," Rebecca said, making notes. "And given the timing and circumstances, we can make a strong case that their actions with your current home directly triggered the clause granting you immediate ownership of the lake house." But this was just the beginning. As we dug deeper into financial records and property documents, more discrepancies emerged. The down payment for my current house had been larger than I realized, comprising nearly the entire cash inheritance from my grandmother. Yet the trust documents showed my father had only credited half that amount, pocketing the rest for administrative fees. "We're building a case for financial elder abuse posthumously," Rebecca explained. "Your grandmother's clear intentions were subverted for personal gain. The courts take that very seriously." Each discovery fueled our strategy, but I struggled with the implications. "These are still my parents," I confessed to Rebecca during a moment of doubt. "Am I going too far?" She fixed me with a steady gaze. "Jessica, they're evicting you from your own home to fund an extravagant wedding for their favorite child. They've misappropriated your inheritance, lied to you for years, and shown no remorse. This isn't revenge. This is justice and self-preservation." With renewed determination, I established a timeline that aligned perfectly with Adam and Sophia's wedding date, now just 5 weeks away. Legal filings would be prepared but held until the optimal moment. Evidence would continue to be gathered, statements collected from witnesses, financial trails documented. I created a spreadsheet tracking every dollar I had invested in home improvements, complete with receipts and before and after photographs. I documented the current market value of these improvements with statements from contractors and real estate professionals. Meanwhile, I had to prepare myself financially for the fallout. I met with my bank to secure a pre-approval for a mortgage just in case. I reviewed my investment portfolio with my financial advisor, shifting some assets to ensure liquidity if needed. I updated my will, removing my parents as beneficiaries and designating several charities instead. Throughout this process, I maintained weekly sessions with Dr. Lowell, a therapist Rachel had recommended. These sessions became crucial to maintaining my perspective and emotional health. What you're experiencing is the grief of betrayal, Dr. Lowell explained during one particularly difficult session. You're mourning not just the loss of your home, but the final loss of the family relationship you always hoped for. Sometimes I worry that I'm becoming like them, I admitted. Calculating, cold, focused on revenge. There's a fundamental difference, she replied thoughtfully. They acted out of selfishness and disregard for your well-being. You're acting out of self-respect and a desire for justice. Standing up for yourself isn't revenge, it's healthy boundary setting. These conversations helped me refine my approach. I didn't want to destroy my family out of spite. I wanted to protect myself, reclaim what was rightfully mine, and perhaps most importantly, break the cycle of manipulation and favoritism that had defined our family for decades. As the pieces of my plan fell into place, I received an unexpected call from Sophia's mother, Diane Barrett. She wanted to meet for lunch to get to know her future daughter's sister-in-law better. I accepted, curious about what this might reveal. Diane was nothing like I expected. Where my mother was all rigid perfection and social calculation, Diane was warm and genuinely interested in my work and life. As we chatted, it became clear that the version of the Miller family being presented to the Barretts was vastly different from reality. Your mother mentions how close you all are, Diane said. She's so proud of your architecture career, always showing photos of the home you designed and built yourself. I nearly choked on my salad. My mother had apparently been taking credit for my renovations, presenting them as a family project we had lovingly completed together. And it's so generous of your parents to contribute the lake house property as a wedding gift, Diane continued. Sophia says Adam has such wonderful childhood memories there. That confirmation of my suspicions was the final piece I needed. My parents weren't just selling my current home, they were planning to gift the lake house, which was legally mine, to Adam and Sophia. The complete picture was now clear. They had systematically appropriated my inheritance, claimed credit for my achievements, and were now attempting to steal my property twice overall to maintain their perfect family image and secure a connection to the wealthy Barrett family. As I drove home from lunch with Diane, a calm certainty settled over me. My plan wasn't just justified, it was necessary. Not just for me, but for everyone who had been manipulated by my parents over the years. The cycle would end with me. That evening I called Rebecca. I'm ready to move forward with everything we discussed. No reservations. Good, she replied. I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. And Jessica, for what it's worth, I think your grandmother would be proud of you. For the first time since my birthday, I felt something like peace. The foundation I was building now wasn't made of wood and stone. It was built of self-respect, boundaries, and the determination to create a life defined by truth rather than manipulation. The countdown to the wedding day had begun. With the 30-day eviction timeline ticking away, I needed to be strategic about my next moves. Rather than fighting to stay in my house and potentially alerting my parents to my plans, I decided to comply with their demands on the surface, while preparing everything behind the scenes. Finding temporary housing was the first step. Rachel's offer of her spare room was a godsend, and I began gradually moving my most precious possessions there, the handcrafted furniture pieces. I couldn't bear to part with family photographs, mostly of Grandma Grace, and important documents. For each item I removed from the house, I took detailed photographs and kept meticulous records. Rebecca had advised this documentation could be crucial for any future claims regarding property value or personal possessions. Make it look like you're complying fully, she counseled. the element of surprise is our greatest advantage. I drafted a carefully worded email to my parents. After careful consideration, I've decided to comply with the eviction notice. I understand the family's financial needs take precedence over my living situation. I'll be fully moved out by the specified date and will leave the property in excellent condition for the sale. Please let me know how you'd like to handle the viewings and real estate listing process. My mother's reply came within minutes. That's very mature of you, Jessica. I knew you'd see reason once you had time to process. Your father will handle all aspects of the sale. No need for you to concern yourself with those details. Don't forget your final dress fitting is next Tuesday. The dismissive tone, the complete lack of gratitude or recognition of my sacrifice, only strengthened my resolve. But I maintained the facade, responding with brief, polite messages whenever they contacted me about wedding preparations. As Adam and Sophia's wedding drew closer, family gatherings became more frequent. Engagement parties, shower brunches, planning sessions, each event was an opportunity to gather more information while maintaining my compliant demeanor. During a family dinner 2 weeks before the wedding, my father mentioned the lake house casually. We've had the caretaker doing some special preparations at the lake property. Adam and Sophia are going to be quite surprised by their wedding gift. My mother nodded enthusiastically. The Barrett family has been so generous with the wedding costs, we wanted to make a grand gesture in return. Nothing says, "Welcome to the family," like property. I took a sip of water to hide my expression. That's quite a gift. I have such fond memories of that place with Grandma Grace. Well, it was just sitting there generating rental income, my father replied. Much better to keep it in the family this way. I nodded thoughtfully. Absolutely, family first, right? Behind my agreeable facade, I was confirming the final pieces of my plan with Rebecca. The legal documents claiming my rightful ownership of the lake house were ready, as were the complaints regarding misappropriation of trust assets and inheritance funds. We can file these at any time, Rebecca assured me. Just say the word. Let's wait until the day before the wedding, I decided. I want everything in place before they realize what's happening. Meanwhile, I had been cultivating relationships with key people involved in the wedding. I volunteered to help coordinate with vendors offered to pick up family members from the airport, and generally made myself indispensable to the wedding preparations. This gave me access to the vineyard venue, the guest list, and most importantly, a legitimate reason to be involved in every aspect of the event. The venue coordinator, Melanie, particularly appreciated my organizational skills. If you ever get tired of architecture, you'd make an excellent event planner, she commented as we reviewed the seating arrangements. You have such an eye for detail. I believe details matter, I replied, especially for important family events. Through these connections, I learned that my parents had nearly maxed out 3 credit cards paying for wedding expenses. The Barrett family, while wealthy, had been clear about which costs they would cover, and my parents had greatly overextended themselves, covering the rest, all to maintain the appearance of equal financial standing. I also discovered that Adam and Sophia would be announced as the new owners of the lake house property during the reception, with a symbolic key presentation planned as a highlight of the evening. This information allowed me to refine my timing. The legal filings would happen the day before the wedding, ensuring that the lake house transfer couldn't legally proceed, but not giving my parents enough time to develop a counter strategy. The final week before the wedding was a flurry of activity. I completed my move out of my house, leaving it spotless and staged to perfection. My parents did a final walkthrough, barely acknowledging the improvements I had made over the years. The real estate agent thinks we can list it for $450, my father mentioned casually, as if discussing a random investment property rather than my home. Should close quickly in this market. I nodded pleasantly. I'm glad it will help with the wedding expenses. Everything looks beautiful for tomorrow's rehearsal dinner. The night before the wedding, after the rehearsal dinner where I played my part perfectly as the supportive sister, I sent a text message to Rebecca. Please proceed with all filings first thing tomorrow morning. Her reply was immediate, already prepared. Will be filed when the clerk's office opens at 8 a.m. Confirmation will be sent to you by 8:30. Good luck tomorrow. I spent that night carefully preparing my wedding gift for Adam and Sophia. A beautiful box wrapped in silver paper with an elaborate blue bow, eerily similar to the one that had contained my eviction notice. Inside, I placed copies of all the legal documents showing my ownership of the lake house, documentation of the misappropriated trust funds, and photographs of the eviction notice I had received on my birthday. On top of everything, I placed a card that simply read "Family first. Always." As I prepared for bed in Rachel's guest room surrounded by the few possessions I had salvaged from my former life, I felt strangely calm. Tomorrow would change everything, but not in the way my family expected. For once, I would be writing the narrative. The morning of Adam and Sophia's wedding dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect early summer day that wedding planners dream about. I woke early, my phone already buzzing with texts from my mother. "Makeup starts at 9:30 sharp. Do not be late. Bring your emergency kit with extra stockings. Photographers arrive at 1015. I replied with a simple, "On my way soon, everything will be perfect." As I prepared for the day, applying my makeup with extra care and slipping into the pale blue bridesmaid dress my mother had selected, I received the confirmation email from Rebecca. All documents filed successfully at 8:03 a.m. Lake House ownership transfer to you is now officially recorded. Temporary injunction granted regarding any transfer or gifting of said property. Complaint regarding trust fund misappropriation has been accepted for review. Copies have been delivered to your parents' home address by courier scheduled for 3 p.m. delivery. Perfect timing. The courier would arrive while everyone was at the ceremony, meaning my parents wouldn't discover the legal actions until after the wedding was over and they returned home. By then, my public revelation at the reception would be complete. I arrived at the vineyard precisely on schedule, gift box secured in my car trunk until the right moment. The venue was spectacular, of course. Flower arrangements worth thousands of dollars adorned every surface. Crystal glasses caught the morning light. A string quartet played softly as the bridal party gathered for photos. My mother fluttered around checking details and issuing commands to staff. She barely acknowledged my arrival beyond a critical once-over and a terse, "Your hair looks better up than I expected." Adam seemed unusually subdued for a groom, checking his phone constantly and having hushed conversations with my father in corners. I caught fragments. "Barrett's attorney. Paperwork ready. Announcement timing." They were finalizing the Lake House gift presentation, unaware that the property was no longer theirs to give. Sophia was radiant in her designer gown, genuinely excited about marrying Adam, despite the undercurrent of tension in the Miller family. I felt a momentary pang of sympathy for her. She had no idea what she was marrying into, though after today she would have a much clearer picture. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Vows were exchanged, rings presented, kisses shared. I played my part as the supportive sister, smiling for photographs and offering congratulations. If anyone noticed the calculated distance in my eyes, they didn't mention it. As the reception began, guests moved to the grand hall of the vineyard. Tables adorned with elaborate centerpieces surrounded a gleaming dance floor. The gift table near the entrance quickly filled with elegantly wrapped packages and envelopes. During the cocktail hour, I retrieved my special gift from the car and placed it prominently on the table, positioning it so it would be one of the last gifts opened, but impossible to overlook with its distinctive wrapping. My father gave a practiced emotional toast to the newlyweds, speaking of family bonds and legacy of the Miller family values of loyalty and mutual support. I sipped champagne slowly, watching the performance with new eyes, recognizing the carefully constructed narrative that had shaped our family dynamics for decades. "And we have a special surprise for the happy couple," he concluded, raising his glass higher, "something that will be announced a bit later this evening." The meal was served, a 5-course dinner featuring locally sourced ingredients paired with the vineyard's award-winning wines. I ate little, maintaining my composure while watching the clock. The gift opening was scheduled for 8:30 p.m. between the main course and dessert. At 8:25, I excused myself to visit the restroom, taking a moment to check my phone. A message from the courier confirmed delivery of the legal documents to my parents' home. The pieces were all in place. When I returned, the gift opening had begun. Sophia and Adam sat at a small table near the dance floor, surrounded by friends and family as they opened card after card, gift after gift. Each was met with appropriate exclamations of delight and gratitude. As they neared the end of the pile, my father stepped forward. "Before you open the last few gifts, Margaret and I have a special presentation to make." This was my cue. I moved quietly through the crowd until I was standing near the front, just behind Diane Barrett, Sophia's mother. "Adam and Sophia," my father continued, his voice carrying across the now hushed room. "A marriage is about building a life together, creating a home and future filled with memories. To help you begin that journey, Margaret and I would like to present you with this." He held up a small box containing what I knew would be the key to the lake house. The Miller family lake house has been part of our family history for generations. Margaret and I have decided it's time to pass it on to the next generation. Adam, you spent so many happy summers there as a child. Now you and Sophia can create new memories there, and perhaps someday your children will enjoy it too. Gasps and murmurs of appreciation rippled through the crowd. Adam and Sophia looked genuinely surprised and moved. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Before my father could hand over the symbolic key, I stepped forward, my silver-wrapped package in hand. "I have a gift related to that, actually," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Perhaps you should open mine next." My mother's eyes narrowed slightly, but in front of all the guests she couldn't object. I placed my package in Sophia's hands. "It's something the whole family should see," I added, maintaining eye contact with my father, whose expression flickered with the first hint of uncertainty. Sophia, oblivious to the undercurrents, smiled and began unwrapping the silver paper, exclaiming over the beautiful box beneath. Adam leaned in curiously as she lifted the lid. Their expressions changed to confusion as they saw the legal documents inside. Sophia lifted the top paper, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of the legal terminology. "I don't understand," she said, looking up at me. "What is this?" "Perhaps I should explain," I offered, taking the document gently from her hands and turning to address the gathered guests. "You see, there's been a slight misunderstanding about the lake house." My father took a step forward, his face darkening. "Jessica, this isn't the time or place." "Actually, it's exactly the right time and place," I interrupted smoothly. "Everyone's here to celebrate family, truth, and new beginnings. So let's have all three." I held up the legal document. "This is the official record showing that the lake house property legally belongs to me, not to my parents. It was left to me in a trust by my grandmother Grace, with specific provisions to protect it from exactly this type of situation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My mother's face had gone pale, her perfect makeup suddenly stark against her bloodless skin. "What situation?" Diane Barrett asked, looking between me and my parents with growing concern. "The situation where my parents evict me from my own home on my birthday, to sell it and fund this wedding, then attempt to give away property that isn't legally theirs as a grand gesture." I removed the birthday eviction notice from the box and held it up. This was my birthday gift 5 weeks ago, an eviction notice from my own house purchased with my inheritance money. The room had gone completely silent now. Adam was staring at our parents with dawning horror, while Sophia looked utterly bewildered. "Jessica is exaggerating a family misunderstanding." My mother attempted her social smile firmly in place, despite her pallor. "This is hardly the venue for airing private matters." "I agree completely," I replied. "Private matters should remain private, like the fact that Miller Real Estate is facing bankruptcy, or that 3 credit cards were maxed out paying for this wedding, or that my inheritance from grandmother Grace was misappropriated. All private matters that shouldn't be used to manipulate people or maintain false appearances." My father stepped forward, grasping my arm. "That's enough," he hissed. "You're embarrassing yourself and ruining your brother's wedding." I gently but firmly removed his hand. "No, Dad. For once I'm standing up for myself and speaking the truth. Something this family hasn't done for a very long time." I turned back to the stunned crowd. "I'm not here to ruin anyone's wedding. Adam and Sophia, I truly wish you happiness. But I can't stand by while my parents give you stolen property as a wedding gift. The lake house is legally mine, as confirmed by court filings completed this morning. and I thought you should know the truth about the family you're marrying into, Sophia." Albert Barrett, Sophia's father, stepped forward. "Richard, is what she's saying true? About your business? About this property?" My father's businessman mask slipped back into place. "Albert, there are some minor financial restructurings happening, nothing unusual, and there seems to be a technical misunderstanding about the property trust. We can discuss this privately another time." "There's no misunderstanding," I stated clearly. "I have copies of all the documentation right here. The lake house has been mine since my grandmother died. The rental income from it should have been held in trust for me. Instead, it was diverted for other purposes, just like my inheritance was used to purchase the house I was recently evicted from." I placed the documents back in the box and handed it to Sophia. "Consider this my real wedding gift to you both, the truth. Something rare and valuable in the Miller family." The room erupted in shocked conversations. Sophia's parents pulled her and Adam aside, speaking intensely. My mother stood frozen, her social mask finally cracking to reveal the panic beneath. My father was already pulling out his phone, presumably to call his attorney. I felt a strange sense of calm as I walked through the crowd toward the exit. Several guests reached out to touch my arm or whisper words of support. Emily, my once estranged cousin, gave me a subtle thumbs up from across the room. At the door, I paused and looked back at the elegant chaos I had created. The perfect wedding was now a scene of confused conversations and hurried explanations. The carefully constructed Miller family image had finally cracked wide open. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free of the weight of family expectations and manipulations. Whatever came next would be on my terms, built on truth rather than appearances. As I stepped into the warm evening air, I smiled to myself. Foundations built on lies eventually crumble. It was time to build something new. The days following the wedding were a blur of legal meetings, ignored calls from my parents, and surprising expressions of support from unexpected sources. The Barrett family, far from being the elitist snobs my parents had painted them as, were practical business people who valued honesty above all. Albert Barrett personally called me 3 days after the wedding. "I respect someone who stands up for what's rightfully theirs," he said bluntly. "My family built our business on integrity, not appearances." Sophia's upset naturally, but she needed to see this side of the family she was marrying into. Adam, to my surprise, reached out via text a week after the wedding. "Can we talk, without parents involved?" We met at a neutral coffee shop downtown. He looked tired, the golden boy veneer tarnished by the revelations at his wedding. "I had no idea about any of it," he said after several minutes of awkward small talk. "Not the eviction, not the lake house being legally yours, not Dad's business problems. They never told me." "Would it have mattered if they had?" I asked, not unkindly. He stared into his coffee. "I want to say yes, but I honestly don't know. I've always just gone along with whatever they wanted. It was easier." "For you," I added quietly. "Yeah." He looked up at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time in our adult lives. "I'm sorry, Jess. For everything. For not being a better brother. For being so blind." It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start. Adam and Sophia decided to postpone their honeymoon to reassess their situation, as Adam put it. Last I heard, they were considering moving to Chicago, where Sophia had a job offer, creating some healthy distance from both families. The legal ramifications played out over several months. My ownership of the lake house was uncontested once Rebecca presented the full documentation. The complaint regarding misappropriation of trust funds resulted in a settlement agreement with my parents, required to pay back the diverted rental income plus interest. Most significantly, the sale of my house was halted by court order pending resolution of the inheritance dispute. Ultimately, the court ruled that while the house had legally been held in the family trust, the inheritance funds used as down payment had been specifically designated for my benefit. My parents were ordered to either transfer ownership of the house to me or compensate me for the full market value, plus improvements if they proceeded with the sale. Faced with mounting legal fees and the collapse of their social standing, they chose to sell and pay me the settlement. I didn't fight this outcome. The house, once my sanctuary, now held too many painful memories. Instead, I used the settlement money as a down payment on a beautiful Victorian home nearer to my office. It needed extensive renovation, a project I embraced wholeheartedly as part of my healing process. Each room I restored became a reclamation of my sense of security and self-worth. The lake house, which I now legally owned without dispute, became my weekend retreat. I hired a proper property manager to handle the rental aspects when I wasn't using it, ensuring a steady additional income stream. Sometimes sitting on the dock where Grandma Grace and I used to fish, I could almost hear her voice on the breeze. You build your own foundations in this life. Make them strong enough to withstand any storm. My relationship with my parents remained complicated. Initially, there were angry voicemails, then tearful attempts at reconciliation that always somehow included references to how I had humiliated the family and destroyed our reputation. Never genuine acknowledgement of the harm they had caused or true apologies. 6 months after the wedding, my mother called with news that my father had suffered a minor heart attack. He's asking for you, she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I visited him in the hospital, unsure what to expect. He looked older, diminished in the hospital bed. We talked awkwardly about his treatment plan, the weather-neutral topics that skated around the broken trust between us. As I was preparing to leave, he finally said, "I never meant it to go this far, Jess. Things just got out of hand." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was the closest I'd ever get to one. "I know, Dad, but intentions don't change outcomes." Over time, we established a cautious, limited relationship. Holiday dinners were attended, birthdays acknowledged, but the easy forgiveness they clearly hoped for never materialized. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting and that healthy boundaries are sometimes the greatest act of self-love. My career flourished in unexpected ways. The Victorian Restoration Project caught the attention of a local magazine, which led to a feature article, which led to private restoration consultation requests. I started a small side business specializing in historical home renovations while maintaining my position at the architecture firm. More important than professional success was the community I built around me. Rachel, who had opened her home to me in my darkest hour, became family in all the ways that mattered. We celebrated holidays together, established traditions, supported each other through challenges. Tara and Rebecca, the attorneys who had helped me reclaim my inheritance, became close friends and occasional hiking companions. Emily, my once estranged cousin, and I reconnected, fully discovering a shared interest in community development projects. 1 year after the wedding confrontation, I visited Grandma Grace's grave with a bouquet of her favorite daisies. I sat beside the headstone and told her everything, just as I had done as a child when she was alive. "You were right about building strong foundations," I said, tracing the letters of her name on the cool stone. "But I think you knew all along that the strongest foundations aren't in houses or property. They're in self-respect and truth in the families we choose, rather than the ones we're born into." Looking back now, I realize that the eviction notice on my birthday was actually a gift, though not in the way my parents intended. It forced me to confront the painful patterns that had shaped my life and finally break free of them. It taught me that sometimes love requires distance, that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, and that the most important home we build is the one within ourselves. The old saying claims that living well is the best revenge, but I've learned it's not about revenge at all. It's about reclamation, reclaiming your power, your voice, your right to determine your own worth. The moment you do that, no one can evict you from yourself again. So, if you've ever been betrayed by those who should have protected you, remember this. The foundation you build on truth will always be stronger than one built on lies and manipulation. And sometimes returning the favor isn't about getting even, it's about getting free. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of you? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming betrayal and building stronger foundations. Thank you for listening, and remember, the family you choose is often more valuable than the one you're born into.